This whole question of reincarnation is a really very fundamental one, not in terms of dogma or what we believe or anything like that, but in a very practical sense, on a day-to-day basis of simply knowing how to conduct our lives, and also understanding to a greater extent the circumstances that are otherwise inexplicable. I was amused by the ingenuity of a business proposition that I heard. I don't know if it ever got off the ground, but based on the concept of reincarnation, an insurance company was offering to insure your wealth and give it to you in your next incarnation. I don't know whether it was done by cynics or believers. Of course, the devil in that one would be in the details. But nonetheless, it's a good idea, isn't it? But the fact of the matter is, we don't need an insurance company to ensure that what is ours will come to us incarnation after incarnation. And in fact, you see, a great deal of the capacity to be accepting of God's will is greatly simplified or made more reasonable if we accept the fact that the incarnation that we can presently remember is neither the beginning nor the end of the story. You see how different that is? If we feel that we were born in motion, so to speak, it's true that our bodies are small. When at the YMCA where I go to exercise, it's a family Y, and there's a lot of families and children there, lots of little kids, and often when I'm swimming in the pool, there's this whole little circle of mothers and babies, doing mother-baby sort of water things, trying to teach the children, the wheels on the bus go round and round, and they bounce the babies and they swish them through the water, and what you're watching is mother or father or caregiver, just deeply devoted to this small creature, and the small creature clinging, to the neck of this devoted caregiver or frantically waving its arms. And on one hand, I'm totally charmed by small children, and I often stop what I'm doing just to stare through my goggles and just watch them because they're just so cute. The small creatures of all species are adorable, even as Swamiji says, even a baby elephant, which is considerably larger than the average human being, still you say, oh, isn't he cute? Because there's this kind of guileless innocence about him. In fact, James Corbett, who wrote these very interesting books, James Corbett was a big game hunter in India in the early 1900s primarily, and he was often hired at that time when man-eating, when tigers or lions aberrated from their natural prey and became man-eaters, they would invite him in and he would eliminate them with his gun. These wild creatures that were eating the children and the farmers and so on. And he tells of a story once. He was talking about the smallness of all creatures. He said once they, and this wasn't for hunting purposes, or if it was, they didn't fire their guns, but they were in I think they call it a makan, a platform set up in a tree, and they were setting a trap for a tiger. And in order to do that, they had tied a small goat to the tree there so that the tiger would be lured. And it was a young goat, and when the tiger came, stalking in a very, serious manner, the goat was too young to know that it was a foe, and he thought it was somebody come to play with him. This is how Jim tells the story. And just ran out and started, batting the nose and licking the tiger. And he said the tiger, the hungry tiger, was so disconcerted by this completely innocent behavior that he said he was too dignified to play. So he pretended that he'd come to the clearing for another purpose. Sort of nosed around a while and then walked out. But nor could he carry out what he'd intended to do. Of course, perhaps a tiger of lesser evolution would have just eaten the stupid goat anyway. But in any case, there is this tremendous innocence that you see in these children. And I also, at the same time, we all realize, because we watch these children grow up, or if you're in close proximity, you recognize, the way Swamiji put it, the children play at being children. If you accept the concept of reincarnation, that little baby is no younger than you are. It's just its little body is small, but the age of its soul is the same, and that's what manifests as the body grows older. We get a little hiatus, kind of. We get a little vacation from about the age of 0 to 12 before the ego really solidly kicks in. That's why sweet little children often are not at all sweet when they get older, because their true nature has just been waiting in the wings, and then it comes in, and then we're off again. But I look at those children with a mixture of tremendous affection and upliftment that we all feel, and the other side is every part of me, my blood runs cold, because I see how helpless they are. They're just totally, literally being hauled around by these big people. You know, you see how parents pick up children, and you see the poor little kid, and he's just hanging there like that, right? You know, what can he do? And this big person just lugs him around and puts him here and takes him there, and nothing is within your own control. And if you happen to like your parents or be in tune with them, that's one thing. And the other thing is they're just always with you. You know, you get very little privacy when you're a little kid. They're just always with you. These big faces, just totally, you know, like adoring you like that. On one hand, we think it's all so wonderful, but really, if any of us were subject to that now, I don't think we'd find it very much fun, would we? To always have some big faces, you know, and have people pick us up by the waist and carry us everywhere we need to go, like that. What I'm trying to say is, all of this is an illusion, and if we really think deeply about it, we can see that this pattern, we can remember, many of us can remember back to our own childhood. I do remember when I was 10 years old, and I think perhaps this was slightly presumptuous, but I remember it vividly because it was such a statement of fact. When I was about that age, which was the 4th grade, I got involved with unsavory companions as far as my parents were concerned. You know, at 10, they couldn't be that unsavory, but they were unsavory as far as my parents were concerned. To me, they were just the most interesting kids around. And they were kind of sassy, and they weren't really good in school. But the truth of it is, I was just like them. It wasn't, I had a better facade, I had a more polite facade, but as I used to say to my friends, I'm the kind of kid my parents don't want me to play with. But this was all on a very modest level. But I remember my parents were trying to direct me, and I planted my feet. I was a very small, rather verbally precocious child, so I'm sure my parents must have hardly been able to contain their hysterical laughter when I said this. But I folded my little arms and I declared, "The die is cast," I said. "Whether I'm a good kid or a bad kid is already determined, and there's nothing you can do about it anymore." Just like that. In other words, leave me alone. Now, looking at 10-year-olds, I can see that maybe parents have a little more influence, but the fact is I knew it was true. I absolutely, that's why I remembered it. I knew it was true. I knew that they could control me. And I was even small enough for my dad to pick me up and carry me places. I knew they could control my external behavior, but that my consciousness belonged to me, and it always belonged to me. Now, that's a very important thing for us to understand. Our consciousness belongs to us and has always belonged to us, and other people may act around it and appear to influence it, but when the final moment comes, it only belongs to us. And so much of spiritual literature deals with the concept of death, talks about what happens after death and how to die, and there's so many religious rituals that are all around death, and so on. It's because, very simply, the fact that this incarnation, that this life that we live, has a mysterious termination point, is entirely relevant to every minute of this incarnation. Because of, among other things, the simple fact is that as far as our experience is concerned, it's always now, isn't it? I was sitting last night, I was reading the Gita commentary book the book of Revelations of Christ by Swamiji, and just every so often, one sees oneself, and I just had this almost frightening, but I was able to resist the fear that came with it, realization that here I am, and I will always be somewhere. It's just an inescapable reality that there will always be a self-aware being, and that I will be in the middle of that self-awareness. And that even when death comes, and I've had the opportunity to be with about half a dozen people when they literally breathe their last, and all of the consciousness from the little goo-goo baby and all the years in between, there it is. And the body is dying, and the last breath is happening, and that consciousness is withdrawing. Oh, it's very convenient to say it goes nowhere and it just ends up being nothing. Well, you wouldn't be sitting here if that's what you thought. You know? Where it goes is it goes into the astral world, so the scriptures tell us, and then it reappears in one of those little goo-goo babies being picked up by the waist with these two big faces leaning over into it, with its consciousness completely intact. Now, what that tells us is there's really no way to escape. See, so much of wrong behavior in our lives is based on the idea that I can find a loophole, that there's some loophole in this system, that drugs will be my loophole, or television will be my loophole, or tremendous ego power and everybody does what I want will be my loophole, or lots and lots of money will be my loophole. And the loophole we're looking for is some absolute assurance that I will always be okay no matter what I actually do. Swamiji once made this statement. He said, the only method of self-acceptance that actually works is a clear conscience. You know? And what a clear conscience is not that we're good. Master said it's not even to be good, not enough even to be good because it is our habit to be good. He said we have to be righteous because righteousness is the most attractive alternative that we can see. In this book, Whispers from Eternity, that Dolores was reading out of, there's a very interesting prayer in there, and it says, teach me that even though the ways of vice look very attractive at the beginning, in the end they always prove poisonous to my happiness. And even though the ways of virtue seem arduous and unattractive, that if I can discipline myself to right action, in the end they will prove eternally sweet. And the battle that we're fighting is a very simple one. It's between two understandings of who and what we really are. Am I a self-enclosed entity? Are the experiences, the immediate experiences of my senses and my ego gratification, the key to lasting happiness? Or is this separateness, in fact, an illusion? And is my true identity, in fact, inextricably intertwined with all of creation, and therefore everyone else on this planet and all the natural forms, everything in this planet? Am I a part of all that is? In our Festival of Light, several different places we say, for you are a part of all that is. Now think of the implications of that. If I am a part of all that is, then what is right action? What are my responsibilities? How do I fulfill my true duty in life? In the affirmation we have today, I've heard these things over and over for years. It says, my word, it's about perseverance, as you recall. It says, my word is my bond, so also is my resolution. I must have heard that 15 or 50 times. And each time what I would mostly hear was the rhythm of the words, and I could never understand it. My word is my bond, so also is my resolution. I would think, what does he mean? Finally, it just occurred to me, maybe it's obvious to all of you, I give my word to others, but the word that I give to myself is just as much a matter of honor to me. Isn't that an interesting way to say it? Just because there's no external monitor of it, if I've pledged to you, I will do it. And if I've resolved within myself, I will also do it. Because you see, all we ever really have is our consciousness. The reason there is an external world at all is because it's very hard to objectify ourselves. It's very easy to fool ourselves when there's no one else looking. And so the feedback we get from others helps us to see what we're actually doing. And we don't necessarily learn fast. And that brings us back to this question of reincarnation. The other aspect where reincarnation becomes so vital to our spiritual life is the question of how high should we aspire and how much can we achieve? Because if we aspire for very little, then we can always declare ourselves a great success, can't we? And that's just a fine plan. The question only is, what is our actual experience? I mean, living just for the self and for the ego and for the satisfaction of the body and all the things that would seem so much fun to just do, just to eat and eat and eat and have as many sensual experiences as we can and be as irresponsible as possible and never work and just laze about. Wow, that sounds great. Except that the consequences of it are not so super duper, are they? And even if we try to live in a merely righteous manner, without relationship to God, but just being good, just so many times some inexplicable force will sweep in and just take away from us that happiness. You know, it doesn't have to be profoundly tragic. Our experience shows us that there is the memory, and that's the only word for it, the memory of a perfection of happiness that nothing less satisfies. St. Augustine said it beautifully, speaking in prayer to God, "Our hearts were made for thee alone, and are restless till we find our rest in thee." And many people live many lifetimes without it ever even occurring to them that that's what's wrong. What they think is wrong is that they were too overweight, or that they didn't get to finish college, or they got a lemon for a husband, or a bad child, or not a child at all, or all the different things that we do over and over and over again. And the reason we come back to reincarnate is because we dream desperately of happiness, and we don't quite get it for 1,000 reasons, so we die with unfulfilled longing. And God is no tyrant. We have unfulfilled longings. We get to come back and try to have those longings fulfilled. And the irony of the whole reincarnation system is that eventually we do get them fulfilled. We get them all fulfilled. Because it isn't a question only of disappointment. It's a question of degree of fulfillment. And that's why I raised the question, how high can we aspire? How much can we achieve? In the Bible, Jesus says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." Now, do you think he would have said that? Meaning, but don't even try, kids, because there's no chance. He wouldn't have made such a powerful statement if it wasn't not a compliment. It was just a statement. Be ye therefore perfect. That's how high we can aspire. That's what the Bhagavad Gita talks about again and again. Krishna points out to Arjuna in this particular chapter the difference between God realization and Arjuna's present state. But again and again, Krishna says to Arjuna, you can, you will, you must. Perfect happiness. Be ye therefore perfect. And Jesus said to his disciples, "That which I do, ye shall do, and greater things." But simple common sense shows us that in one lifetime, we can make a certain amount of progress, but very few reach that level of perfection. And yet the longing is there, and then once a little experience comes in, there's this growing certainty that even though I haven't yet achieved it, it is mine. And you see what extraordinary, bliss is the only word, the idea of reincarnation brings. On one hand, it's a kind of a grim prospect when you see those little babies being carried around, and one of my friends said that he meditated, often before his first child was born, but changing the diapers of that first child and visualizing himself being the diapered rather than the diaperer, made him realize suddenly that he better start meditating a lot more seriously. And he said he didn't miss a single meditation after the time his first child was born, because he saw that unless I begin to really transform my consciousness, I get to come back. I get to try again. I get to play the whole thing out. I often think now, because so many of what I consider to be a greater understanding of life, I know is just the fact that I've been on the planet for 60 years. Even though when I was 10 I made those strong declarations, still I've learned a lot. And I feel, and I don't mean to have a negative affirmation, but let's be realistic, friends. Swami Kriyananda is the kind of consciousness that never has to come back. Mine isn't. So the chances of my being a baby again are really great, and I would like to make the best of it. So I often visualize myself being 18, 16, 20 years old, and viewing life through the same eyes that I have now. You see, I don't mean to be elderly in my attitude, so to speak, but to have the same sense of detached understanding of what this is really like, and not fall into the folly of youth that imagines that there's no consequences for any behavior, and that, do you understand? Because this perspective is by no means a sad one. It's exactly the opposite. It's this understanding that we are on a path to perfect bliss, and all we have to do is just put one foot in front of the other. And if we have to shed this body and don another, and shed this body and don another, what difference does it make? We are on a path to perfect bliss. And as Swamiji also reminds us, and as we experience, it's not all or nothing. It's not utter misery and then bingo, it's all free. That's sort of the Catholic idea of you just hang on with grim determination. The Christian idea of grim determination, you die, whammo, you're in paradise. Whew. You know, the process of self-realization is nobody's dogma, as I was saying. It's our actual experience. The more we live in harmony with the way God made us, in appreciation of the divine law, in attunement with that divine bliss, the more we have of it. And even if we have to go through many more incarnations, they're not so bad, if we can keep this God remembrance with us. And even though we have perhaps other karma, bad karma, so to speak, difficult, challenging karma to live through, it's not so bad if we can keep God in our heart. Because our success is assured. Divine realization is the only guaranteed achievement in your life. You know? God is no tyrant. Divine Mother loves us. She just waits open-armed like this. Once, at Ananda village, what is now Hansa Temple used to be an office building, and there was a porch on the front, and we used to sit on that porch, which was up on a hill, and you could look down into the community, and then what they called downtown, the market area was down there. I remember one lunchtime I was sitting there, and I saw a friend of mine and his 3-year-old daughter, and they were about 100 yards apart. And the child saw the father. And even from where I was, I could both watch it and hear it with that extraordinary joy that little girls often have in their fathers. She just screamed out, "Daddy!" like this. Then she raced across the 100 yards and just launched herself into his arms with the complete confidence which he fulfilled that he would just catch her like that. I mean, it brought tears to my eyes. It was so dear, to see such a beautiful expression of divine love. And I thought to myself, that's how Divine Mother is with us, isn't she? She's just standing there. She seems at a distance. But she's always got her eyes on us. And at a certain point, we'll just look. And we'll stop looking at anything else. We'll just, with that one pointed assignment, just launch ourselves into her arms. And she will catch us.